I have existed from the morning of the world, and I shall exist until the last star falls from the night. Although I have taken the form of Gaius Caligula, I am all men as I am no man, and therefore I am a god. Welcome to Morally Offensive, a podcast reminding you that men have one thing on their minds, the Roman Empire. I'm Bill.
And I'm Stephanie.
And today we are excited to discuss a notorious film epic which blurred the lines between adult films and mainstream cinema.
This is a podcast about the films condemned or considered morally offensive by the Catholic Church.
I used to be Catholic.
And I was raised in the Reformed Jewish tradition, although not especially successfully.
I'm unhealthily obsessed with the religion that raised me.
And I'm just here for the dirty movies.
The films we cover are selected from the official film review lists of the Legion of Decency, RIP, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'm an award-winning motion graphics designer, editor, and DJ.
And I produce film fests focusing on obscure 70s horror, offbeat midnight movies, and all sorts of Euro sleaze, but the good kind.
And together, we are on a journey to watch every film condemned or considered morally offensive. Stephanie, thank you for coming back today. It's good to hear from you.
Bill, this was an invitation I could not turn down. Oh my God, Caligula.
Yes, and I've been looking forward to bringing this guest on board, but I wanted to get the podcast up and running and to prove that we could, in fact, run a podcast for a year successfully on time with consistent quality. And we've done that. So
we have. Congratulations, Bill. That's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for becoming a bigger part of it as different roles have shifted and stuff. Cisco's had to take a little bit of a back seat, but he's still involved. And we have lots of good people involved. Jess, you, Kevin, it's been a good time. But I'm so excited to talk about not just Caligula, but Caligula, the Ultimate Cut, by someone I've known for a long time, producer Thomas Negovan. Thomas, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on board and agreeing to talk with us about this insane film. It's a film that's been something I've been aware of for years, and I'd never really ventured to see it until this point. So I kind of gave myself an excuse to finally watch it. I know I told you that I watched one of the many butchered edits of it before I watched the Ultimate Cut, and you were kind of like, why did you do that?
Yeah, when people would walk up to me and say, oh, I love Caligula, I would always kind of size them up a little bit. Like, okay, there's something wrong with you. We just have to figure out what it is.
The Ultimate Cut is pretty incredible. It really adds a lot of coherency to the film. I felt like it really improved so many of the dramatic beats and tension and kind of reintroduced at least some of the intent of the original film. You can just see where there maybe wasn't the most care taken in some of the scenes with the way camera setups were done and things like that. Incredible work from the post-production team on this. I just can't believe the amount of work that went into reconstructing this. This movie definitely outraged Catholics. I have some great readings for later in the episode that we're going to talk about the response. But I think we need to kind of set the stage here. I mean, how did you end up involved in this, Thomas? How did you come to this project?
As with how most things seem to go, I just knew someone. He worked for Penthouse. The short version of the story is that Penthouse in Bob Guccione's day was a very different entity than after the advent of the internet. And so it had a lot of bankruptcies and changed hands. And so a new owner acquired Penthouse and the asset base. And they were buying it for the assets that they could use online. They had a storage space that was filled with items marked Caligula. And again, kind of truncating it, the idea was they thought it might be something. They didn't know what to do with it. This friend of mine said, I have a guy that can look at this and tell us what, if it's something. I had never had any interest in Caligula in any form, but I was a huge Malcolm McDowell fan. And because every interview he said, "Do not watch this movie. It's embarrassing and an abomination." I was like, well, I'll take your word for it. Like, I've been really good in my life with taking people's advice. If they're like, don't do this, I'm like, all right, I won't do that. But I had heard the rumors that there was a completely different movie that they believed they were making. And so when I went in to look at the materials, it was like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm opening these boxes, and there's there were literally original camera negatives that had come out of a camera and been
So
processed and then never cut into. And so I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking, this is just a once in a lifetime situation. And I was in the process of, I had a lot of projects on my plate at that moment, but it felt like the kind of thing where I knew if I didn't do it, that the gate would just come down again and no one would see these things. And so
it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to do something like this. I mean, this is like
Yeah.
discovering, I mean, I don't want to compare it to Metropolis, but there is like that discovery of the lost scenes from Metropolis 2 different times.
I think it's a totally valid comparison. I would say even more so. I mean, obviously Metropolis is one of the greatest films ever made.
Right.
But I mean it in the sense of that this wasn't finding a couple scenes. This was like, even if this is a terrible movie, at least I'll know. Like, I'll have watched all the footage. So there was this whole other mystery around it. You know, when people talk about this is in it, this is in it, this is in it, but you just don't know. And this was getting to see the raw materials. So again, trying to make this kind of short and not doing a good job, but so I agreed to dig into it and then give it a real assessment. And then once I got into it, I could not believe how immaculate the negatives were.
Wow.
Just
I mean, they
unbelievable.
look beautiful, what I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought that what we were going to do was take the old version and pad it out in a couple places. That's what I imagined would wind up happening. And then, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but then I realized really quickly when Malcolm was calling the original such a bastardization of what happened. Like, I remember the first time I sat to watch Caligula, and I had like the 4 or 5 versions of the script that were the prime versions, and I was fucking lost trying to watch the movie.
The cuts I've seen before yours, I was the same way. I said, I know the story of Caligula. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I can't find where I am on any of these scripts, and eventually I had to give up and just say, okay, I'm just going to watch this movie. And then I realized, okay, now I'm like, I wanted to assess a bunch of the footage first, so I was coming in clean. But then after watching it, I realized, it was like, oh my God, this really is kind of a wreck. And again, I still thought we'll wind up just rearranging and padding and things like that. And then kind of the last point that's relevant to that is just the other thing that I realized really quickly was they had absolutely no care paid to what they were selecting. And so it became obvious really quickly that, that there were better shots, there were better takes, so I could ramble on that for hours.
No, I mean,
that's basically how I got into it.
Some of the early cuts I watched, my initial thought was either this is a carelessly made movie or there are multiple options here and they did not select the best takes. And then I watched yours and said, okay, there's totally different material here we did not see in the Guccione cut. So it's been a fascinating thing to kind of dig into and explore. I think first, let's set up, what is this movie? Like, why does this thing exist? Who's funding it, right? It's coming out during the era of porn chic. They're shooting it in the mid 70s. It's funded by Bob Guccione of Penthouse. And how did they, I guess, first of all, the intent here, I believe, Thomas, was to create a serious, dramatic movie that could have elements of adult film in it, like a truly adult film, a film that doesn't hold back on the sex and nudity, but that tells a broad epic, dramatic story. The kind of thing that could be nominated for an Academy Award, but also just has a lot of dicks in it. Is kind of the vibe I get from what I understand. And is that it? Am I totally off base here, or is that kind of like what the intent was when this was?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I talk about some of these things now, I feel like, like the crazy uncle that was in Vietnam that's sitting out alone in the backyard at Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Bob Guccione is the most unreliable narrator in his story. So he said, yeah, my vision is to create a new kind of film that's an unflinching view of reality of what life would have been like in Rome. And I think that is true, but I also think people don't know what they don't know. I think that his view of what a film could be was deeply colored by the fact that his head was submerged in pornography.
I can see that, especially when you look at what he did to the movie after production wrapped. Now, did he re-edit the whole thing, or was he just inserting porn wherever he felt like?
Well, they filmed in 1976. Early in 1977, so around, they started in the summer. Some of this is stuff that hasn't been talked about. By October, Bob knew that what he thought he was going to get was not what he was getting.
Okay.
And he had been, before that, he had been like Tinto, for example, wanted very realistic looking people. Like he was hiring ex-convicts and prostitutes, and things like that. And
very Italian approach.
Yeah. Bob flew over a bunch of Penthouse pets that he wanted put front and center in every scene. So there's a lot of clashing going on. And Bob's best friend at the time, the person who filmed the pornographic inserts, was Giancarlo Louis. And Giancarlo told me he thinks that by October is when Bob had formulated some form of a plan.
Okay.
And what that plan was is that they finished at the end of December, finished filming, and then immediately thereafter went back onto the sets and filmed a bunch of pornography with the same extras, same costumes, everything, just with a bunch of the pets dropped into these orgy scenes.
And it was a different DP or the same DP as on the main movie?
No, it was his friend Giancarlo was filming.
Okay. Which is why it looks totally different.
Yeah, no one involved with the Tinto Brass production knew that this was happening.
It's very obvious because when you watch the old cuts, the pornography that is inserted looks like a totally different movie almost. Like the lighting, the composition, everything. There's no cohesive vision there.
No, there was no crew. There was no, it was very, very, very different. Bob films that, and then they fired Tinto. And so Tinto was working on his edit. He starts it, and then he shows up, and the door's locked, and his editing machine is outside in the snow. So then he sued Bob Guccione and won in Italy.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's because they believe the director is the owner of the film. And so...
Must be nice.
Yeah, so then Bob told the Italian authorities, well, this film needs a special chemical treatment that can only be done in London. And so then he got the film out of Italy to London, which was a jurisdiction that would agree with him that the producer owns the film. So he smuggled it then from there to New York, and they had a laundry list of different editors. I can't imagine Bob was easy to work for. That's why when the movie came out, it says editing by the production, because no one would put their name on it.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't want that on my reel.
Yeah. So getting to your question of, how was this edited and all of that, I think that it reached a point where nobody gave a fuck anymore. I think it was like
Mm.
there are scenes where costumes change because they were shot in the same room, but they're different scenes that are cut together, and
That's wild.
things don't line up. And like the fact that he wakes up like he's had a nightmare, and the scene before that was him rolling
Frolicking.
around with his sister in the woods. Like none of it makes from the first cut, from the first scene to the other, it doesn't make sense. You don't know who any of these people are. And then on top of that, you've got just these weird random things cut in that don't make sense.
I think of the scene with there's the peephole kind of over the bed that he looks in, and in the real movie, or I mean, it's your cut of the movie, and then like the way it was supposed to be, is one side is like a side where somebody listens in on like the emperor or whoever's in the bedroom. But in the original cut that I saw, or at least whatever cut I saw, he looks in that hole, and then there's just like two lesbians making out. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
Whereas in like the actual narrative, it makes sense because you understand that this is like a way people are spying on people.
And then there's another one where he thinks there's someone listening in through that hole, runs around the corner, and there's a guy giving another guy a blowjob, and then he shuffles them off. That was Tinto that came up with that. So, but even that, like, I don't think even Malcolm understood, like, oh, this is how he's going to cut this. This is what this is going to be.
How well did Bob know Tinto before he was brought on as what was then labeled the director? What alignment happened that it was brass behind the camera of this film? Because if you look at what he had done before this, it's very experimental. It's very frothy. There was some gravitas in Salon Kitty. And obviously that was about a very heavy topic. So on paper, it seemed like it might be a good match. How did Tinto become so, shall we say, intimately involved in the project?
Bob believed that Tinto was green enough that he would do what Bob wanted, and he just wanted a director that wouldn't be skittish about the subject matter.
So Bob Guccione approaches Tinto Brass essentially not because he sees in him a kindred spirit. I mean, maybe partially, but it seems like a lot of it is him thinking that he can kind of guide this director to essentially be a cameraman for the project. Is that kind of the vibe I'm getting off of this, Thomas?
Yeah. He wanted someone that wouldn't be precious about the kinds of things he wanted to capture. And he also wanted someone that was a novice that he felt that he could steer. The director that came closest to getting it before Tinto was Nick Rogue.
That's fascinating.
Interesting. I had also heard that Stanley Kubrick had been approached to direct it.
I'm not sure that Kubrick was approached. Kubrick, there's the old story about Kubrick and Terry Southern at a party where someone put on porn in the background, and they were talking about the fact that one day there could be a truly adult film made in the mainstream, but I don't know that Kubrick was approached for this.
Yeah, I don't know if he was either. Lena Wertmuller was someone else that they were kind of trying to converge with, but she had her own vision that veered off separately. And you may or may not know this. The first director was Paul Morrissey. He was the first one.
No, so that makes total sense to me.
That was before Bob. The project originated with Franco Rossellini. And Franco and Gore were working on it with Paul Morrissey, and they wanted Mick Jagger to play Caligula because Franco used to hang out at Studio 54, so he was friends with Bianca, but they couldn't get funding.
There's so many films that Mick Jagger almost ended up in during this era, right? Because famously, he did the screen test with Werner Herzog for Fitzcarraldo as well.
I think he was looking to be cast in Dune as well.
Of course, during the Jodorowsky period, when Jodorowsky was kind of pitching Dune around.
So they couldn't get funding, and Gore Vidal had a tenant in one of his buildings, Jack Silverman, who had recently been hired to head up a film division for Bob Guccione. And he and Gore were friendly, Jack and Gore. One of those hallway conversations. What are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm working for Bob and with Tinto.
Right.
Oh, I think I have something for him. And so Bob then came on board, but the first rule was to fire Morrissey. Like, he didn't want a Warhol art film. He knew that he wanted like kind of a 50s style grandiose epic.
Right, like a sword and sandal.
Yeah, exactly.
Hearing you talk about who was proto involved, it really seems like there's an underlying shift from a New York-based approach to an Italian-based approach, that the physicality of the filming clearly had a lot of, there's the DNA, there's the fingerprints of the sword and sandals, the big rickety sets that were really prolific in 50s Italian films. And there's no doubt that Tinto would have seen them.
Franco was a producer on a couple Pasolini films. He also was involved with some of the Franco Nero films. And there's something with Franco Nero having a brother or something. I don't know, but he was part of that film industry. He was Roberto Rossellini's nephew. And so he was in New York a lot of the time, but that isn't what Bob wanted to connect to. Bob wanted to connect to that Italian tradition, and so they filmed in Italy. We're definitely looking at it like a colossal, which is what they call the huge productions.
Right. And I think you can see that in things like, I think of the costuming of Enya, for example. She looks very much out of something like Caligula from back in the day, like an old Italian epic.
Danilo Donati wanted everything to look, he was looking at like Mussolini era design.
Well, and famously, Donati, who never reads scripts before he designs a set.
Yeah, the decapitation machine was not in the script. Neither was
not surprising.
The three-story palace with an elevator or things like that. So it's a very absurd. I looked at it, like, one of the ways we found into it that clicked for me was looking at it like the comics that, like, Jodorowsky and Milo Manara did, the Borgias. And so to me, I was like, okay, so this is like a Metal Hurlant comic book version of Caligula. It's not history, it's history adjacent. And then that's when an elevator and a decapitation machine makes sense.
I do think it is funny that Gore Vidal's concept of history was just as off base as Donati's, because Rome was this very colorful place, and Gore Vidal wanted this very austere white marble look, which we now know is not completely true of the Roman era.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, they thought that for 1975, when he was writing, Gore was pretty accurate. The irony is that Donati, being like batshit insane with his designs, proved in the end to be more accurate, because we now know that these things were so garishly colored. So it did work out, but at the time, that's why Gore got banned from the set, because he saw the sets, freaked out, and told the press that it looks like the lobby of the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. And then Tinto retorted
ultimate insult.
Yeah, and then Tinto retorted with, if Gore doesn't shut his mouth, I'll publish his script. And that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating production of like all these different personalities kind of not agreeing with each other and not having the same vision. Why did Bob even get involved in this, honestly, or finance it? Because it seems like he just wanted a bunch of porn in a feature-length movie. Why did he go through the trouble of getting Sir John Gielgud and Dame Helen Mirren, all these incredible actors and actresses? Granted, Helen Mirren kind of at the beginning of her film career at this point, more so known for the stage, but still known as a Shakespearean actor at this point. What was Bob's end game here? Because I feel like he thought he knew what he wanted and then just kind of like panicked at the end.
What does every person who, imposter syndrome is
Yes.
a real thing. And so one of the things that I feel like I can see now, coming back to that idea of feeling like the uncle at Thanksgiving, sitting and drinking out by the garage, reliving Vietnam experiences, I can see where now Bob had funded movies like The Longest Yard and Day of the Locust and Chinatown, and an Alice Cooper concert film. And he wanted something where he would be in the driver's seat. Like he would be the guy.
He had proven himself as an executive producer, but now he wanted actual like creative control over the situation.
I wouldn't even say he'd proven himself. He put no, you know what I mean? Though, like it's dumb money. He'd put money in, made and or lost some, but the important thing is he was trying to buy access, and he didn't really get the access that he thought he was buying. Like, for example, he was involved heavily in the funding for Chinatown, but was Jack Nicholson anxious to have dinner with him? Probably not. And so I think that him, he had been telling people for a long time how sophisticated he was. You look at the photographs of him out in New York, and it's very glamorous. But the reality is there were copious amounts of doors that were closed to him.
Okay.
And so I think that he had the idea, if I do this, those doors will open to me. And I will be respected in culture in a way that I deep down know that I am not being respected. And had he hired Nick Rogue and not had an ego problem and just said, look, you're a fantastic director, and tried to collaborate in on that, I think he would have got what he wanted. But look at what we're experiencing with someone like Trump. Do you know what I mean? Like once the ego comes in, there's no collaboration. It becomes this chaotic thing. And so the problem you had with Caligula is that you literally, think about this. Gore Vidal, who's got to be like one of the fucking biggest assholes to ever walk the earth. I love Gore Vidal. I love him. But that guy lives for brutality of wit. Then you've got Tinto Brass. He was an anarchist. You know what I mean? Like he was very...
Yeah.
And then you've got Bob Guccione. So literally the three biggest egos you could possibly put into the same kennel. And of course they were going to fight. And of course there was only going to be one left standing. And so Malcolm says that the first day of filming, Tinto whispers in his ear and says, if we don't fuck these Americans, we fail. And Malcolm was like, well, what about making a good movie? And so he was aware from the first day of filming that it wasn't even about the movie. It was just an ego battle.
Thomas, do you think that Playboy's production company that had worked with Roman Polanski, that had really tried to position itself as an engine of cinema culture, do you think that was in Bob's head as well, that he was so oriented toward being a thorn in Playboy's side that the success, or at least perceived success, of Playboy's productions fueled some of this mania behind this movie?
I don't know. I've not really looked at that. It is a very good question, but I don't really have an answer beyond the real motivation for Bob, from what I can glean, was never external. So even the idea of like, we're going rabbit hunting, even that penthouse, I'm sorry, Playboy was irrelevant in that equation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, it was just, how do I make this about me is like his mantra every morning.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me.
But still, so like, I mean, it could be that he thought they're starting to fund these things.
Yeah.
I need to now be more visibly associated creatively so that I'm the one that's respected in this way. Like, so I don't know how much that was a driver. There's another part too, which is the idea of, cinema in New York. If you think about Times Square and the way that a lot of money was trying to move into those places, and he was knocking down doors with the prospect of this kind of thing. So I guess what I'm saying, it is a really good question. The answer could be yes, but I'm certain that wasn't all of it. I think at the end of the day, every account from every direction, from the people who loved him and the people who hated him, is that Bob Guccione was an epic narcissist. And so I think that what this was he'd failed as a painter, made all of this money with pornography, but still wasn't getting respect, and wanted to make a really great piece of art that would knock down boundaries.
Just funny, though, that he wanted that and then totally sabotaged his own project. Not that other people weren't, but like, he didn't help it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the things, is I'm trying to give you the real kind of sincere observations here, which is, look at it this way. If he was wired to not do that, he wouldn't have built the world that he built in the first place.
Okay.
And I think that, like, because I found Bob incredibly entertaining. And then I imagine what it would have been like to work with him. And I could see where the idea that someone could change shape to adapt to what that situation needed is not reasonable or likely for someone who's made those decisions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No, that does make sense. And I mean, I'll say it myself. Like, the one time I've lost my temper on set was we had a situation where no one was directing a commercial shoot. And the person theoretically in charge was a quote executive producer who put up money for a small independent film with starring a character actor you'd all know. And finally, I was just like, I'm supposed to be the director of photography on this thing, because there's like 3 producers in the room and then some crew. And we were like, who the fuck is directing this thing? Because it was like, I'd lay out a shot, give directions, and I just be like, look, do you guys want me to direct this, or do you want him to direct this? But who is directing? I just need someone to take charge who knows what the hell they're doing. This kind of has the vibe of that, of just like, who is in charge of Caligula? You know what I mean?
So the story of Caligula is about somebody who actually existed. Like, this is a historical tale of a young Roman emperor who, in the 4 years he ruled Rome, did all sorts of civic projects, made sweeping changes to the Senate, to the physicality of Rome. But also, over these 4 years, he underwent a really intensely vile transformation from a young man who was unsure of himself, unsure of his power, to an absolutely vile piece of shit. And we get to see it.
So much of his rule is associated with him being a vile piece of shit, to the point that we don't know him as Gaius Caesar anymore. We call him Caligula, which is his nickname from childhood, which means little boots. It was a reference to the little boots he would wear when he'd go follow the Roman military around. And he never outgrew it. It would be like calling President Trump by his like childhood nickname today. That's how offensive this would have been to him, to have been constantly called Caligula, which is hilarious.
On
And,
the other hand, it speaks to how initially he was really beloved by the Roman people. And it
yes.
was, of course, the absolute power given to him that corrupted him absolutely. And what I really like, Thomas, about your cut is speaking to the many versions that we all referred to earlier, is that while I think you addressed the sex scenes, the acts of sex, the physicality of sex, the genitalia, the breasts, that was all in there. But you really gifted Malcolm and Helen and an extraordinary cast the chance to show the film they thought they were making. And I think that really, really comes through your sensitivity to the character of Caligula, and more accurately, Malcolm McDowell's performance as Caligula, which is incredible. And you really found that performance, Thomas, and your version really shows it off.
I have to credit Aaron Shaps, who was the editor on this, with I feel like each of us made one point that kind of helped us align and kind of triangulate our coordinates here. And he was working with me on the archiving. And so all of the interviews I was listening to and reading, he's a history buff. He was right there with me. And so when it came time to edit it, it made sense that he was the right person to do it, just because the materials were so complicated that it would take someone a year just to even begin to catch up. But because the whole thing was so complicated, figuring out where does Gore's vision sit in relation to Tinto's and in relation to Bob's, and I felt like I had to sit in the middle of them and play Mr. Rogers, but we still, even when we kind of knew what those things were, we were really lost. So the point I wanted to make is just that I feel like my contribution was recognizing that we couldn't look at this as history, but it needed to be kind of metaphysically history adjacent. And we started looking at it more like a Jodorowsky film.
It has a lot of like the same kind of material going into it as something like Fellini's Satyricon. Even though that's based off a piece of fiction, I feel like spiritually it's kind of akin to that movie in a lot of ways. I was getting a lot of the same vibes. Obviously, Donati also worked on that one, so that does help.
Yeah,
but
I mean, definitely visually, it was very much from the same place. And the thing that Aaron said is he was the one that clarified this. The reason we couldn't make heads or tails of so much of the footage is there was no real director on set. The Italian actors most of the time are performing like they're in a farce. And the British actors are performing most of the time like it's a straight film. And so Malcolm said that, he was not receiving any direction and was doing everything under the sun just to see what would stick, and, trying small and big and bigger to fill Donati's sets. And so the thing that Malcolm pointed out is he said there is this middle ground in Malcolm's performance that can be our continuity. And so, like, for example, when he pulls the ring off of Tiberius, the shot in the original, he flails his legs and it's so dramatic. And we found one that was more realistic, things like that. And so the reason that I think that it does respect the performers is that we approached it from the sense that we wanted everyone to look like they were in the same movie, and not, the disparity between pornographic footage and then this histrionic footage that just made the whole thing kind of confusing. So,
well, it's obvious that you and Aaron and your whole team brought a lot of love to this project. And I think what was really interesting about that love, how it came through in a long, to be fair, but a narratively coherent, intriguing 3-act film that was pornographic, but not necessarily pornography. And I think that's the balance that you're referring to. And especially in that scene you just referenced, where Caligula wants that ring. And the ring, of course, is all part of the fetishization that we see in the set pieces. In the beginning, we have the terrible augury of the bird, which, is a foreshadowing. We meet Caligula and we see him step toward his inexorable fate. You really let that plot breathe. And the conflict when Caligula grabs the ring, the physicality of the scene that you chose really adds the gravitas, the sadness, the melancholy that I think Brass and Malcolm and crew really wanted to bring to the set in the film. There's a pathos that's really missing in Guccione's vision.
There's a lot that's missing from Guccione's version.
But really delving into the structure of the ultimate cut, it really immerses us in this young man's world where things are really about to change. And as we see him make that first stab at power by grabbing the ring, we've really gotten around how Caligula was presented in the 1980 version, which is kind of as a buffoon.
Well, and just a tyrant. He's a tyrant out the gates in the original cut. At least the
there's
earliest one I saw.
no ramp up. There's no bandwidth of evolution to this character, and as a really complex character, that wasn't fair to Malcolm or the story itself in the 1980 version. It was really interesting and a pleasure, Thomas, to see how the first act of your cut of Caligula unfolded and really brought me into a sophisticated, complex plot.
At the beginning of the film, and Thomas really cleared this up with his version, but basically, Caligula is summoned to Capri. What the film in neither version makes totally clear, the passage of time is a little bit open-ended, but in real life, he was on Capri for 6 years with Tiberius and his friend Nerva, as well as his uncle Claudius. And so this is a very long time period before he becomes the emperor. Because you'll notice in the movie, he says they're going to move from Capri back to Rome at one point. And that's a period of 6 years from the beginning that has passed. And it's not completely clear that that's how long this is. It seems very quick.
Can you imagine what his adrenal glands were like at the end of 6 years of thinking every day he could be murdered?
Yeah, and he's basically a child at this point.
Yes.
That's the thing too.
Yes.
Is
the paranoia.
Because he died very young. Yeah. He died at he becomes emperor at age 24 and dies at age, I believe, 27 or 28. So it's a very short, we're talking like when he's on Capri, it's like from him being a teenager to age 24, right? Can you imagine being a teenager and thinking that your uncle or his friend Nerva or someone else is, or one of the Praetorian guards is going to kill you? And it's an island. All the while, people are having like penis torture done to them while being force-fed wine. There's random orgies with swans going on. Tiberius, the emperor, has a pool where he has boys swimming under him, biting his balls as he swims. This is actually historical fact, by the way. That's the crazy part. This movie tones down some parts of history that are insane, which is an insane thing to say about a movie like Caligula, that it actually does tone down some things from the reality. So,
Thomas, when you started to put the first act of the ultimate cut together, how did you want to approach not necessarily the time jumps, but how we meet Caligula, knowing how in 2.5 hours how it was going to end?
The things that we did were we tried to make sure that with the music, that we started out more idyllic and harmonious. There's more period instruments at the front end of the film, and it proceeds into more kind of, distorted synth heavy territory. And so sonically we were trying to give the subtlety, but the big thing is we really looked at it as 3 chapters, where you had the part where he was the innocent, which is why, like, for example, we didn't have him drown Nerva, because he can't be a killer until that third act.
That was such a great decision, by the way. That really struck me as a smart and empathetic way to present Caligula. And also, that scene in the 1980 version is really unpleasant. It's just very mean and unnecessary.
Yeah, we
I
thought
was
it
really
was
impressed with the decision to remove it.
we thought it was better to have the speech that Nerva gives. It's funny because that's one of the things that Malcolm didn't like. And it's very funny because we've argued about it. And I tell him why. I'm like, no, you can't have him. Excuse me. He can't kill someone. And he said, everyone was killing everyone back then. And I was like, that's not the point. That's not.
Yeah, right.
Like, what he said in his interview is that to just play him as a madman would be boring, but to play him with a real arc would be interesting. So it's kind of funny in the sense that I'm listening to everything he was saying back then. And I feel like that Malcolm would have said, yes, you should have cut it. And so, so that's what I'm
Well, and I
sticking.
believe you kind of like resurrected this Gilgood speech too, if I'm understanding, using like pretty modern technology, audio cleanup technology.
It was AI. They never so the way that Italian movies were shot back then, the audio was just meant to be a guide, and so you would have pipes clanging, like they were literally building sets while they were filming. And that's a common thing, though. And so you'd hear like pipes clanging and guys swearing in the background, and with Gielgud's performance in particular, right next to the tank of water he was in was a pump. And so it was just unusable. Anyone that understands audio will know that if you've got like a truck roaring the entire time, there's no equalization that you can do that takes that out.
No.
But
not even basic noise removable stuff, or gates or anything like that.
It was completely unusable. So between the time that we started the work and when we finished, the technology that Peter Jackson had been developing for the Beatles documentary, which my understanding is it came from government technology, like
FBI,
to listen
I think,
to
right?
lobsters and take out the noise in the restaurant kind of thing.
Right.
And so our audio guy Kevin was using like beta programs and things that hadn't been released yet. And the point is that by the time, I mean, now you can get that stuff on Isotope,
Right.
but at the time it didn't exist. And so if anybody had tried to do this 5 years earlier, you never would have been able to rescue that scene. And so we thought when we started that we were going to have to put a disclaimer at the front apologizing for the low quality materials. But the irony is that by the end of the film, that scene is one of the best sounding scenes just because we were able to spend so much time on the audio. And also Teresa Ann Savoy's performance was from the location. There's a lot of characters in there. A lot of the smaller characters, like the senators that, come in, and like the senator that offers his life and things like that. Those were all the real actors speaking on set.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, have you gotten any pushback from people interested in like film restoration about your use of AI on this? Because I know that's kind of a controversial topic right now. Has anyone commented on that, or is it kind of like more of a thank God you could use that to restore this scene that wouldn't be usable otherwise?
I mean, it's my experience has been unanimously positive because it's
Excellent.
not like we didn't
You didn't regenerate his voice; you cleaned it up.
we didn't like take the footage and then type in one or feed in a scene that didn't get shot, like the
Right.
opening, and try to redo it. It was all yeah, we were using it for cleaning, and and there's things that aren't, we talked about this a little bit privately, like there's a lot of problems with the movie, and a lot of it is the way that it was filmed, the way these things were recorded.
Multicam a lot of the time, right? There were a lot of
It was
multicam.
shooting 3
Shots.
cameras, and they were right next to each other, so you couldn't cut between them. There are moments where we might have wanted to shorten things a little bit, but you
Right.
couldn't cut it together any way other than it's like taking 5 jigsaw puzzles and someone saying, now you're going to make these into one thing.
Well, and if a person wants to really understand that, if you go back and watch an earlier cut, like I watched one of the early UK cuts, you can see that whoever edited that, be it Guccione or whoever he hired, there are so many shots where you're just like, really, that's the shot you selected? Because it would be like a really oddly staged composition, very theatrical, of like 3 actors together turned toward each other. And I'm like, what is this shot? And then I saw your cut and I was like, oh, there was another camera angle there. Okay. But there are some cases where you can tell there literally is no other option than the angle you chose because the and I'll just explain this for people real quick because this is like film nerd shit we're talking about, and I feel like it does need some explanation. So 3 camera setup. This is what you see in sitcoms. Any sitcom you've seen from before The Office, basically. So Big Bang Theory, Seinfeld, that type of setup. 3 cameras. They have to be kind of near each other. One might be punched in for a close up on one character, one punched in on another character, one for what's called a master shot or a wide shot. Really basic. One of the first things you learn in film school is how to do a 3 camera shoot. And the problem on a set this big is you're so far away from people, unlike a sitcom set where it's very tight and you can still get tightly focused shots in the close ups, right? When you're this far away, you're using a just very long lens. What that means is it's harder to keep in focus on the character because you have a tighter range that you can keep them in focus. So if they move forward or backward a little bit, they can get out of focus very easily. The other problem is because you are so punched in, if a cameraman wiggled a little bit or breathed the wrong way, your camera is going to shake or bounce. And the other problem is that it also flattens everything behind the person in close up. So it just looks flat and a little out of focus. Really, the way you should do it is actually move the camera forward and put a shorter lens on there, like a 35 millimeter or a 50 millimeter lens to get that close up. And they weren't doing that. Do you think they were doing this because of budget, Thomas, to save money to
No.
run 3 cameras at once? Or do you think it was just carelessness?
The one thing that you didn't mention that I think is really salient to the 3 camera setup problem
Okay.
is what you're seeing when you're in a movie or when you're watching a movie. I'm so sorry. You described a sitcom, and a sitcom is a stage.
Right.
Movie sets are not stages.
No.
And so there's a movie that was filmed on these sets called Messalina. And the hilarious part of it is they did a better job showing off these sets than Caligula did because they moved the cameras around, and you can see that all of these are 3-dimensional environments. When you watch this movie, this was another of the big hurdles. It's like watching an opera because everything you're removed from the action because you're in the audience, like watching a sitcom. So that's the biggest problem for me. And looking at this from an editing point of view is everything is the same direction. It's like watching something on a stage. And then the part that you're talking about is Malcolm said that as an actor, if a camera's all the way back, you don't know if they're doing a close-up, a medium, or a
Right.
wide. And he said, as an actor, you're going to treat each performance differently.
Yes,
Are
absolutely.
you doing body motions? Are you really dialing in with your face? And so the thing that really, to be blunt, I think Tinto thought it was brilliant. And I think that whenever I see in comment sections on Reddit people talking about how brilliant it is, I think you've never had to try to edit that shit together. It doesn't cut together, and the performers hated it. So the idea that he discovered, like literally, like Kurosawa, like needs to just bow down to Tinto Brass. Like if he'd only put all three cameras 2 feet away from each other, like film would have improved. So it really was just it was a horrific waste of film footage, because someone will be doing like a really nice slow zoom, or they'll be focused in on something, and like you said,
Right.
someone will bump the tripod. And there were
Yeah.
so many shots that we would be like, oh dear God, don't fuck it up. Oh, motherfucker. Like somebody would be doing a beautiful slow movement in on Helen Mirren or something. And then just, like a toddler running in to the room, like it would jostle. And there's so much footage that, they shot like, whatever it is, 90 to 100 hours of film.
Right.
Easily half of that could be discarded just because using these long lenses, and long lenses meaning he was, for the layperson, he was using these long zoom lenses that didn't allow for any depth of field. And so when
I say it's flat behind them, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the background, the figure, the foreground, all because on this lens radius, it's kind of like, imagine if you've got a cucumber and you cut 3 little notches at the end. If you look at it and you pick it up and look at it the long way, those things all look like they're right on top of each other. Whereas if you did one at the end, one in the middle, and one close to you, if you hold it up, those 3 seem like they're further apart. But on these long lenses, you're only using this tiny, tiny bit of the lens. And again, I keep saying this, but I have to keep giving props to Aaron, because
absolutely.
he was.
As an editor, I was impressed by his work.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Thomas, you explained a lot of what was wrong and problematic and annoying about the footage. But as the film progresses and we meet the Helen Mirren character, I noticed right away that the footage that you found had a lot more close-ups, particularly in the scene with at the Temple of Isis, where there was more of a sensuality, a femininity. And then, of course, when we see the Helen Mirren character, we see a connection between her and Caligula, and the sex that she and Caligula and Drusilla have, I think it's Drusilla, is intimate.
Yes, it is.
It's
later on, though. It's later in this movie.
Understood, but as the film progresses, I did notice that the shots got tighter, that the women were embraced a little more by the camera. And I was wondering, was that something that you decided to do?
A lot of that had to do with the sets themselves. Like, for example, the Temple of Isis is a smaller room. I think that one of the things that I have to say that is an overwhelming positive, a lot of the complaining is kind of, like I said, it gets a little insider baseball. The thing that like we're complaining about, I can't believe they just use long lenses and stuff. But the thing that is the overwhelming positive is there were 2 things that were just inescapable. One of them is Danilo Donati's sets were so incredible that my frustration that they didn't move the camera around is I've seen in the set photos and also in Messalina. I've seen what the other parts of this look like. There's half of this landscape that they didn't shoot. But so the sets being so beautiful, it took away a lot of the pain. And then the thing that really pushed it into being beautiful were the performers.
Yes.
And the performers had no idea that there were like, you know, a handful of pubic hair in the gate, and like they didn't know any of that. They kept dialing in the performances. And so, you know, we were able to find enough to be able to share that. And like we talked about Malcolm, Caligula being a madman, things like Helen's monologue as Caesonia, talking about, do you have to be so obvious? Like performances like that the world had never seen. And my jaw is just on the floor watching a master performer deliver something that after it was shot just went into the can and no one saw it for almost a half a century.
I mean, that
So
the
that's the
irony that
positive.
Guccione wanted to make a beautiful art film, and he did. he had one.
I was just going to say, people have asked me, like, you know, what do you think this person, or this person would think about the movie? I think Gore would absolutely hate it, just because.
Yes,
but he hated everything.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, there's just no world where you're going to win it. I think
he'd have a great time hating it.
I think that Bob would like it. And the thing that I think Bob would do, like if I had been there as an arbitrator, I think what he would have done is he would have wanted 2 edits. I think he would have wanted this kind of edit to be the one that went out to, like, you know, to play in Iowa. And then he'd want a more pornographic edit. I think he definitely would have pushed it harder with the orgy scenes and things like that. And the reason we didn't do that, because people ask that, like, oh, were you being censored? It just didn't feel necessary.
A lot of the porn feels really like distracting from the story at times, and I think you struck a good balance between like keeping the vision there, but also like not, because so much of it feels silly in the other cuts where you're just like, why are we doing this right now? It just feels like it's slowing down at parts, and like,
yeah, we had to sell the idea of silver lame platform heels in ancient Rome.
Right.
And if you're gonna go there, things like showing the guys ejaculating into the bowl.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, at what point are you trying to just get the, like, it's like clickbait. You know what I mean? At what point are you just trying? Are you telling a story, or are you just trying to give people things to be shocked about? And so that was why we made those decisions.
You really improved the Malcolm, Helen Mirren, the first sex scene between them. And I think it was wise to cut when you did, because the first time I watched it, I just felt like these poor people, these 2 poor actors right now, because it just kept going on. And I'm like, it's just silly. And like you gave it enough to give us the idea of like, okay, Helen Mirren's character is kind of like, you know, she is willing to go along for the ride essentially with this emperor to gain power.
So good in this.
Yeah, I thought you really captured that idea of like, she's not necessarily not enjoying the sex, but she's just kind of like, whatever, you know. And I thought that was great. And then also like her pregnant dance scene, I thought you did a great job of cutting around that, because the original cut was awkward. It's just whatever was chosen there was just awkward, and I thought you did a great job of saving that. So again, it's wild to see how this can be such a different film with a different editor behind it. It's wild.
I feel like something is wrong with me, because you started to talk about that, and again my brain started complaining, because that prosthetic belly looks so fake.
Yeah.
That all the footage that we had, like, she dances around the whole room and it looks like she's wearing like a backpack over her stomach. It's the totally different color.
See, my thing was, I was like, is he going to cut that scene because of how bad it looked? And then I was watching yours and I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Is this like maybe some kind of ornamental like piece that looks like a belly that goes over the pregnant belly? And then I came around to, oh, no. This is a bad prosthetic. Got it.
Well, what we did is we used a lot of shots that had the smoke, a lot of shots that were long, and we only used the belly when we had to. My hope is that someone watching this cold that isn't coming in knowing, oh, this is kind of a notorious prosthetic,
right,
just wouldn't notice it, that it all would kind of be happening so quickly. But I laughed just because that was a really hard scene to cut.
I bet. Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, because of all of that. I'm so sorry. Stephanie, you should ask me something optimistic because I feel really bad.
Sorry, I'm over here as the editor looking at it going like, so how do you work around that garbage?
I'm ready to jump in with a more neutral question for sure.
I'm sorry. You have to understand, like in my career, there's been so many times where I've just had to go to a producer or director and be like, do we have B-roll for this, like this object or like this, or do we have like a third angle for this person? So like, I feel your pain. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, the good news is that I will say this, that while we were working on it, it was such a fun thing to do that it wasn't like we were really upset. It was more just like, you know, a lot of you got to be kidding me kind of moments and stuff. So it's, again, we're kind of commiserating over, oh, this was terrible. But, you know, the performance is really made up for.
Well, and just, oh God, again, Donati's sets in this movie is such like a treat at times to watch. There's so many like just visual. If it weren't so porny, it would be a great like DJ visual. You know what I mean? Like throw it on in the background while you DJ.
Thomas, as the film progresses, and in your version, we do get to see Caligula disintegrate. And the beginning of that disintegration, at least in your vision, is the death of his sister Dusilla. And I was wondering, how did you approach that with the more expansive vision of bringing more depth, not only to Caligula, but the relationships that drove him and ultimately ended him?
I mean, I think that, you know, we talked about his time on Capri being 6 years. His entire family had been murdered. So the only stability, the only footing that he had in the world was his sister. So when you take this completely emotionally deficient young man, and you give him unlimited power, you know, there's no discipline, spiritual or intellectual, with which to wield that. And so having a place to put his feet and a voice of reason was the only thing that kept him moored to reality. And then when you remove that, that's when he really loses it. And so for me, the big part of the real focus of the third act is not just insanity, it's actually awareness. It is the idea of him becoming aware that he is a character in a story. There's lines like when the bag of blood breaks and he says, "Don't worry, it's only a show." And him ascending the white marble stairs, that's a very it's a very Rosicrucian tradition, that the ascension into wisdom. And the fact that there's that Egyptian play where they're talking about Isis and Osiris, and the way that Osiris becomes king of the underworld is that his body is dismembered. And so the relationship to his sister is the most pivotal moment in the story.
In any of the footage that you found, were you impressed with or interested in Teresa Savoy's performance as Drusilla?
Yeah, I think with her, the thing that I was most struck by as a performance was how delicate she was. You know, one of the complaints about her from, you know, the production side They obviously overdubbed her voice for the final release. I think that she was perceived as being a bit flat. I think that we were able to find that in a tamer version of Caligula, in terms of Malcolm being histrionic in the 1980 version, that she comes off to me as delicate, and that there's a placidity and a gentleness there that is notable when it's absent.
Yes,
So I don't think
agreed.
Yes.
Agreed completely.
moment, as much as just I think there was a tone. I think her voice is really beautiful. I couldn't believe. I don't know. I can't believe that they didn't have her do her voice. I think it's beautiful, and yeah, I love
She
her.
really held her own in the scenes with Malcolm. I mean, I think Helen Mirren did and was going to, but the Drusilla character really came through in your version, and her presence, her gentleness, her delicacy was really missed in the third act, and it helped to frame Caligula's emotional implosion and ultimately the end of his reign.
Well, Caligula and Caesonia have that Sid and Nancy vibe, and the thing
Right.
about
Definitely.
so the thing with Drusilla is she's like the mother with the toddler. You know, like, no, we do not wipe shit on the walls. Like, we're going to wash your hands, and you're not going to do that
We do not
again.
marry our siblings in Rome. We
Yeah.
don't do that. Right.
And so, yeah, so I feel like, that's the absence of that makes room for Malcolm to become the pinball, and for that whole manic peaking that happens after that.
And how did you, with this version, approach that descent into madness? Because the 1980 version is really
It's already there.
offensive.
You arrive there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Right. I guess you're right. How did you decide to arrive there?
we just looked at it as three acts. We looked at it as, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just what the story was. I'm not sure.
Maybe there was some disagreement about how to treat the character, because it sounds like, am I right in assuming either Tinto or Gore Vidal wanted the character to be kind of firing on all cylinders from the beginning, and it was Malcolm who kind of said, no, there needs to be like an evolution?
I mean, what these guys said and what they did were very different. Like, Gore was talking about this development, but then you read his script and he's fucking crazy from scene one. And that was the problem that Malcolm had with it. And so it's like Gore's rhetoric didn't match what he wrote. And
Okay.
Malcolm came in and was saying it's boring. He's like, to just flail about for 2.5, 3 hours.
Well, especially from him being a youth at the beginning, like the implication is he's very young at the beginning.
Yes.
So that makes no sense for him to be a maniac right out the gates.
Yeah. So that was, I think Tinto and Malcolm were in full alignment on that. I think that, some of the things like dunking Nerva's head, I think that Tinto was deviating. I don't know that Tinto would have found it in the edit, but I do think that, the material was there to create the arc that they were saying that they wanted.
Okay.
But that was my perception of it, is that Malcolm was the prime directive in making that possible.
He presents as very innocent with Tiberius, who is this kind of decrepit. I don't know what's going on with his face, but he's got some like diseased face situation going on.
Syphilis.
Oh, it is syphilis. I wondered. Okay.
Yeah.
And the emperor obviously in decline in this situation. He's this kind of like bright-eyed kid still. And then he has him do the little dance that Caligula was so famous for as a child that he would do for the military in Rome. This little kind of childish dance. And here's this 20-something-year-old man. I mean, in the movie, he's supposed to be like 16, but, doing this very child's dance by the pool. It's really interesting, and it makes way more sense when he's not a maniac right away. I think it works so much better when he has this kind of allowed to have a little bit of innocence before he really turns into his full form in the movies.
So, Thomas, there are some real iconic scenes of total depravity that I feel everyone with a capital E knows about, whether or not they've even seen the movie. And I'm wondering how in particular you approached the decapitation machine and the fisting scene.
I would say that the question I got asked the most about the movie was, oh, is that scene in it?
Oh,
What
yeah.
they meant was the fisting scene. Like they
Mm.
kind of, half the people would say it and half wouldn't, and they'd be like, you know.
It's funny. I think this actually ties back into our cruising episode, because didn't the fisting come about because Guccione or someone else involved had recently been to the Anvil and saw like live in-person fisting for the first time?
Yeah, Franco
It was Franco. Okay.
that, and then the other one was the decapitation machine. Those were the two that we got asked about the most. And so I think with the positive thing about the decapitation machine was that there was a battle that did not feature into the 1980 release. And so our ability to make that a more exciting scene was, I feel, a lot easier. I really love the music that Troy came up with for it. It's so bizarre and strange and science fiction-y, and the fact that this thing is moving closer and the plot's developing and that a sword fight happens. I wouldn't say that any of this was easy, but I would say that was one of the easier scenes to edit. That was one that I don't think I even touched. I think that like Aaron just did it. There are ones that where you can kind of see my hand more. That one, I think Aaron just did it, and I watched it and I was like, that's it. It's great. Everything is what it needs to be. The one that was really difficult was the rape fisting.
Yeah, I bet.
Scene. The version that's in the movie, we did have walkouts at Cannes. We did
wow.
walkouts at the premiere in LA, and that's the toned down version. There was footage that was really, so my version of that got really nixed by Aaron. Because he was like, dude.
Yeah.
And the thing is that there was footage that was painful to watch. Like, it was so brutal. And I felt like, maybe I was just desensitized from being in it for so long. But I felt like I got a little lost in that scene. And I keep giving Aaron credit because he was the best wingman I could have had on this. He pulled me back into, but what's the 3-hour arc? Like, are you
right.
dropping something in here that's going to just like
derail
alienate everybody, like from any possible way of getting back into the movie? The version that's in there, with as disturbing as it is, there was an edit. It was like completely, I don't know what I was thinking, but the footage was there. There's great footage, and Morella D'Angelo was so good. And one of the things that Aaron argued for that I loved the idea of is the way that scene is edited. We're watching all of it. When the violations happen, we step away. And so like the curtains are kind of in the way. And that's not meant to be like an obscuring in terms of censorship. The idea there is that it kind of removes Caligula as a character and makes him more of an experience, a negative experience. A lot of the shots that I was using were shots kind of over Caligula's shoulder, things like that were very in the moment. And so that detachment that was Aaron's ideas, he felt that would be more respectful to the idea of the experience. And even like there were parts where the actor playing, but there was footage with him where he was knocking it out of the park. but so much so that it really was like upsetting 10 times
Okay.
more than what we showed. There were scenes that we tried to push as far as we could. That one we were trying to just really, really dial it back just to try to keep the wheels as straight down the lane as we could. It's also the only part of the movie that has zero music. There's no cues in it.
Right.
And that was a point that we all arrived at the same point. As Aaron and I were talking, and we were both like, there's nothing we could think of here to give Troy for notes. And Troy had been watching the scenes as well. And he came back to me, and I was like, well, hey, on this one, or actually, no, I think he might have said it first. He said, I really think on this one, I shouldn't. He just felt that it would be kind of disrespectful to put anything over that. And like I said, Aaron and I had kind of come to the same thing. And so that was a lot of information. I don't know. I think I answered it, but
no, I think you did.
That was a really, really hard one because it was so grotesque. And also I'll tell you one other thing. In the script, that takes place before he has sex with his wife and his sister.
Wow.
We moved it to after because Aaron said there's no coming back from this.
Right. People are not on his side anymore.
Right. He was like, there's no way. Like at that point, that scene, the intimacy between those three characters will not register because we know at that point he's a monster. So we did go against the powers that be from 1976 on that one to kind of draw that as the line in the sand for when it's acceptable for the audience to just completely despise him.
They are despisable acts, so I think you made the correct decision.
So let me ask, this film, obviously you've been very close to it. How was this received when it came out in the 70s?
It made an extraordinary amount of money, and I think everyone pretty much agreed that it was ridiculous.
Okay.
They were charging exorbitant price for tickets.
Right, because you could charge more for X-rated films if I understand correctly.
It wasn't X-rated. It was never rated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Bob Guccione was four-walling, and so not rated meant that no one under 18 could be admitted, but that was fine. Like no one under 18 should have gone anyway. But he knew that it would get an X rating and didn't want to subject himself to, a jury of not his peers. But everyone wanted to see it. Debbie Harry was in the front row, like she talks about that. John Travolta hid behind the candy counter so the crowds wouldn't see him, and then sneaked in, and Usher walked him to a seat. Like these things were in the gossip columns on a weekly basis. Like someone else was going to see Caligula because it was such a scandalous thing to do. But it made a ton of money. It's like driving past a car crash.
It is funny. On IMDb, it says the worldwide gross was $305. I can't imagine that's correct.
No, it ran for a year in Manhattan.
Yeah, I know it made more than that, but it's just funny that that's what it says on IMDb. How many versions of this exist, and why are there so many of them? I feel like I understand the Bob Guccione panic at it, but like I feel like there's just so many variations of this thing.
Most of them are the same thing.
Okay.
In my mind, there's really the unrated version.
Okay.
There's the R-rated version. There's the beautiful job that was done for the anniversary release.
Like in the early 2000s.
What did they call it? The Imperial cut?
Yeah.
Where they did their best to try to kind of cut it into shape. But all of these other variants are really just maybe a few seconds put in. More than anything, it's just things cut out.
Right.
Like for example,
from the unrated.
Yeah, because if you're showing in British censors have their list of things that are unacceptable, and Japan blurred out all the genitalia. Like so, no, it's just
doing that. Jeez.
And so maybe in Japan they would cut a few minutes out, and maybe they'd put 30 seconds of something else.
Right.
But I feel like, that's why there's so many versions of it. It's just because every
Okay.
country had their own, rules, laws about sex on screen.
And I will say, before we move on to the Catholic reviews, I just have to say thank you for adding more animal shots back in, because I really love the little baby leopard in the movie.
Oh my God.
He didn't get enough screen time in the original.
We were laughing about this when we were doing it. The person whose role increased the most was Incitatus.
Okay, the horse.
The horse. Wait, you guys, I have to tell you a really quick Caligula joke. You know that meme or that question where someone says, replace every actor in a movie with Muppets but one. And I would always say, Caligula, keep the horse.
Now that's a movie I'd watch. Oh, and on that note, let's find out what the Catholics had to say about this movie, because it's pretty amazing. And we're back. What did the Catholics have to say? Well, I've pulled a bunch of reviews, kind of what you would expect for the most part. First, the Catholic News Service. This is the capsule review that kind of appeared everywhere from the bishops. This is from November 12th, 1981. So I'm assuming this is for the R-rated version. This somewhat altered R-rated version of the X-rated original is just about what you would expect. A dreary, exploitative movie awash with sex and violence, which brings not a trace of insight to the figure of the historical Caligula. Thus, it has been classified C, condemned by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Boom.
Yeah, I mean, are we surprised? No.
No.
If only they had seen the original, I can only imagine what their opinion would be.
Do you know that Bob told the Pets that the Vatican was sending an assassin after him?
I'm sure he did.
Did.
That sounds like a Bob story.
There was a gas leak in a hotel where they were staying, and he told the Pets that it was the Vatican trying to kill him.
I mean, that's a great story, if nothing else.
And when he was in the obscenity trials for Caligula's initial release, he had a Benedictine monk that testified on his behalf that the movie was historically accurate. And I don't know if it was a monk or a priest, I don't remember offhand at the moment, but what he was arguing is, what better way to steer people toward the Catholic Church than to show them what life without Christianity was like. So Bob had a religious figure, I don't remember if it was a monk or a priest, but testifying on his behalf in defense of Caligula.
That is a wild take. There are other movies where I would definitely
fiction?
buy that, but wow.
Amazing.
From the Georgia Bulletin, 30th of April, 1981. This is a good one. Taking on the creators of Caligula in the courts is a waste of taxpayers' money and time. It is a no-win situation. The fight is over before it begins. The law of the land has defined obscenity in such an obscure and widely liberal way that legal opposition becomes a clear impossibility. Caligula and the penthouse set cannot be successfully challenged in court, that is. But these grinning purveyors of porn for dollars can be defeated soundly in the home. The glossy, explicit excuse for nudity is obviously finding shelter within the confines of the good Christian home. When penthouse, Playboy, etc. are banned from our homes, offices, and lives, the profitable grinning will stop. The Caligulas will not emerge from production. Caligula, the so-called historical account of the Roman emperor's private life, is just a heap of trash. And while we admire the efforts of Mr. Micallef to expose the twisted minds that would unleash this monster for money, we fear the unfortunate results he has achieved. Caligula could become the best pornographic piece in the last decade. Forget the court suits, forget the Supreme Court's definition of obscenity, forget Penthouse Productions, except to declare that as far as our personal efforts are concerned, Caligula will definitely be the flop of the century. We will not buy it. Wow. So that was in reference to attempts, I believe, in Georgia to kind of, use obscenity laws to stop Caligula from being screened, which it wasn't the only place where that happened.
Yeah, Hinson McAuliffe was the guy that they sued preemptively because he had threatened to, he was one of those moral majority leaders, and he had threatened to shut them down. But he was the Solicitor General for Fulton County in Georgia.
Okay.
I could get
that all makes sense.
He was basically, he flagged them on, he was the one that was blocking them from being sold at like 7-Elevens and stuff like that.
Okay. Which makes sense. That sounds about right. And that kind of ties into the next one, which is also from the Georgia Bulletin from September 1980. So this is actually the year before, about similar issues with this film. Good news from Morality in Media. In a grateful letter from Father Morton A. Hill, president of Morality in Media, he acknowledged a marvelous response from the Atlanta audience to the TV special Pornography, You Are Its Victim, aired on Channel 11 on July 20th. Father Hill has written all governors of the U.S. asking that they appeal to President Carter, urging that federal anti-obscenity laws be vigorously enforced. In Father's letter to Governor Busby, he stated, a glaring example of this lack of enforcement is the entrance into the United States of the Guccione film Caligula. This film was made in Italy, subsequently declared obscene in Italy, and removed from exhibition in that country, seized by U.S. Customs as contraband. Critic Rex Reed said of it. Now, Rex Reed was a typical critic. We're not talking about a Catholic critic. Rex Reed, very famous film reviewer at large. This quote from him. The most graphic sexual aberrations flourish in close-ups that would be banned on 42nd Street. Father Hill claims that this is the most depraved film he has seen in 15 years working in this area of obscenity. And then they give an address where you can find more information from Morality in Media. It's very funny. I'd copied another part of that article after that, but evidently at the same time, the Knights of Columbus were trying, they had fought against the ERA amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment. And this article was praising them for their work fighting against the rights of women. So that's awesome. And, gay people and everybody else. Catholics. But yeah, it's just, it's what you would expect. It's nothing surprising. I think these ones are always funny because it's like, I'm not surprised by the reaction. It's a film produced by Penthouse. I'm not really surprised by the reaction from Catholics at all here.
Me neither.
But I mean, given that, I'm curious, it's hard to ask you this, Thomas, because you're so close to this movie now. And it's weird to ask you if you like a movie you've worked on, but do we give this film our imprimatur? Would we recommend it to somebody? Would we recommend it with conditions? I guess I'll let Stephanie go first and I'll come back to you, Thomas, so you can think about how you want to field this one.
I've been thinking about this, Bill, and just like everything else with Caligula, it's a lot of complications. But the long and the short of it is, yes, but it has to be the ultimate cut version. And
Right.
I'm also going to say you got to see it in a theater.
Oh, a challenge. A little late for that, but yes. But I mean, Thomas, you're still showing this in theaters in certain venues, right? I believe this is going to Japan next. Is that correct?
Yeah, the theatrical run in Japan is next, and there's a 35 millimeter print that's been circulating.
All right, Stephanie, let's do it
for one-off screening.
I'm totally down. Costume party with Caligula.
That's what the first screening of that print was. The music box dates that we did. The interesting thing I think about this movie is that I don't think that many people get it yet.
Right.
And the reason I'm saying that is because there is a story that is about Caligula, the historical figure that has the narrative. And Gore Vidal was so trained in classical literature that I think that there was a structure there was a skeleton that was in this beast,
right,
that remained there, that when I watched this when it was done and you're kind of taking it on one level, I really don't think that it's possible to understand it in the way that I see it in one viewing. And so I do think people should see it. And the thing that I would say is that there are artworks that do reward kind of peeling away the layers.
Yes,
and I think that
absolutely.
the first time you watch a movie like this, you're just trying to follow the story. You're trying to figure out who the characters are. You're trying to, maybe you're blown away by the sets. But there's a lot to take in. And the thing is, once you do that, and if you're watching it the second or third time, there's so much subtlety in the arc of the character and in the symbolism and the places where things repeat and the gravitas of this person starting out innocent, becoming a monster, and at the end, not just recognizing, like, when he puts his hands on the standards of Rome and he starts to cry. The entire movie, everything that he does, the little giant has been doing as well.
Right.
And when Caligula is crying at that endpoint, the little giant touches his face because he's crying too, but he doesn't know why. And so there are these really small moments like that, that when you're able to kind of, I guess it's like watching opera. Like, you can't possibly get it the first time. So when you start to see all of these little moments, then things like that ascension up the marble stairs, or all of the things that clue in that Caligula knows that he's a character transforming into legend. It's really there. It's not, there's a lot of art that's kind of accidental. But I do feel like people ask me, do you think that Tinto intended that? I don't think he did, but I also don't think it's an accident. I do think that I don't say it disparagingly towards Tinto, but I think it's the backbone of classical literature. It's like the hero's journey. That there is a weird redemption for Caligula. So I know it's a long answer, but I really do think that it not only should people see it, but I think that as a work of art, like an opera, it really does reward examination.
Yeah, I think of, that's actually a really good comparison, because I saw a production of Salome last year, which is already, it was a very modern, 20th century modern opera when it came out, but in this particular take too, I mean, the opera ends with her drinking the blood out of John the Baptist's skull. I mean, it's not subtle as operas go that way, but there was a lot to take out of that performance and to think about. And you just think about the way too, it's like, in our world where our conversations around sex are so different, I feel like it makes it's still very, like, jarring from a modern perspective in terms of how much sex and how much just salacious material is in this piece. But now that there is dramatic weight to it, that there are very clear, like, beats, and there's a good, like, 3-act structure to the thing, I think all those serve to make the point about Rome, about corruption, about power just eating you out, eating you from the inside, essentially. And I think that's really fascinating stuff. I don't know that I'd casually recommend it to everyone. Definitely any of my film friends who I know are sickos. No, just kidding. But any of my film friends who, I think are open to cinema, I would recommend this too. I probably wouldn't recommend it to my Catholic mother. And I don't think she'd really appreciate it. I don't think she'd want to take in this type of thing, but
I would not recommend this to my Jewish mother either, Bill.
exactly.
Bob Guccione in the marketing, like, there's audio of this where he's saying everyone in America should see Caligula. Oh,
but yeah, I mean, anybody, if I know people who fuck with, like, even not necessarily extreme stuff, but just like cinema that pushes some boundaries, I think, like, I would totally recommend this version. I would definitely not say to see the other versions, because they're just hard to follow and confusing. I think this makes sense out of it. I also would recommend, if you want to see this movie, either read up on Caligula, the person, or get, like, an audiobook or listen to a podcast about Caligula, just so you can know some of the major players ahead of time, I found knowing the history very helpful going in, because I wasn't as confused about who Tiberius was or about who Helen Mirren's character was. I kind of understood all these players ahead of time, and I think that helps. Or just have like a roadmap. Another helpful thing would be to watch I, Claudius, the classic BBC series, which this is kind of like I, Claudius for dang ass freaks, if I'm being honest. You know, it's like a it's the porn version of I, Claudius. So yeah, no, it was really fascinating, Thomas, to watch this version you've helped bring to life. And you know, it's the kind of thing where if this didn't exist, I think Caligula might just retain its history as being this kind of bomb, or not really a bomb in its time, but just kind of like and this definitely shows off many incredible moments and dramatic performances by these actors that really make this worth seeing. You know, I think a lot of the people are bringing their A game on this, honestly. It's one of Malcolm's best performances, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, Peter O'Toole's being crazy in it, which is just, you know, he's very extravagant in this. Helen Mirren is incredible as always. It's just,
Peter
it's
O'Toole
worth
was
watching.
frustrated about that. He wanted to do a more dynamic role. In his journals, he wrote they're asking him to play Father Christmas. Yeah.
Do you mean Father Christmas in, like, he's referring to Tiberius as that in this
Yeah,
movie?
like as a goofy, you know, like very.
Okay. I wondered how much that was Peter O'Toole and how much that was the director, writer, producer. That's interesting. Okay. I was wondering who made that decision.
That was a Tinto request.
And I mean, I know Gielgud was not in like the best of health at this time, so that kind of informs his performance as well. But I still like Gielgud's monologue. If nothing else, like there's so many things in this version that are saved. Thank goodness, like Gielgud's monologue, which is fantastic. I'm glad it's back in the movie. So
yeah,
Thomas, thank you for dedicating so much time to creating this project and to bringing the ultimate cut of Caligula together. And also thank you for joining us. This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
What a treat, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Morally Offensive. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. This absolutely helps us gain traction and raise awareness about the show. Please join us again in 2 weeks when we are going to watch the only X-rated film to win a Best Picture Oscar. We are going to be watching John Schlesinger's highly controversial film, Midnight Cowboy. Thanks again for listening, and as always,
go and sin no more.